This is The Journey Podcast Edition. If what you're building didn't come with a playbook, you're in the right place.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to The Journey Podcast Edition. I'm your host, Paul, and today we're diving into a topic that might sound big and lofty, but I promise you it's actually very practical to manage. We're going to talk about innovation. Now, I know what you're thinking. Innovation. That word gets thrown around a lot, and you're right. It's one of those flashy buzzwords that you hear in investor presentations or splashy product launches. We're innovating. This is an innovative solution. After a while, it almost loses its full meaning, right? We tend to associate innovation with billion-dollar tech companies, with miracle drugs from big pharma, or aerospace firms promising to send us to Mars. We think of innovation as the domain of the giants. But here's the truth. Innovation isn't reserved for those large companies or moonshot-style projects. Innovation happens every single day in ways that don't make the headlines. It's the workflow tweak that saves your team 5 hours a week. It's the production adjustment that cuts your packaging waste in half. It's listening to a customer request and applying context and domain knowledge to turn it into a new feature. That's all innovation. And if you're building a company, especially if you're in the early stages, innovation might just be your single best competitive advantage. The real challenge is keeping innovation alive as you grow. That's the point that we're going to address. Let's paint a picture here. When your company is just 5 people, crammed into a small office above a coffee shop, ideas, they flow naturally. You look up from your laptop and you say, hey, I was thinking, and within minutes, the team is discussing and testing it out. Communication lines are really short and they're vibrant, they're active. But as your company grows, those lines stretch. You hire more people, you create specialized teams, you put processes in place, and suddenly, innovation starts to slow. It's not because you've run out of ideas, it's because the system for sharing and acting on those ideas has weakened and started to break down. I've seen this again and again and again over the past couple of decades. Companies don't stop innovating because they lack creativity. They stop because they lack infrastructure and intention. Here's the metaphor that I like to use, that I'm pretty commonly throwing around when I talk about this subject. Innovation has a supply chain, just like your products do. If you don't intentionally build and maintain that supply chain, the flow of ideas, it clogs up. That's where today's framework comes in. I call this the innovation heartbeat. The innovation heartbeat is a simple system for keeping ideas alive in your organization. It's a way of building intentional habits so that customer feedback, team suggestions, and sparks of creativity don't just vanish. Just like the human heart pumps blood through the body, the innovation heartbeat circulates ideas through the organization. It works in 3 phases. Phase 1, pulse in, reaching out to gather feedback and ideas. Phase 2, fill and process, reviewing and distilling that input into actionable insights. Phase 3, pulse out, sharing those insights with stakeholders who can act on them. Let's break those down. Phase 1, the pulse in phase. This is where the system really starts. You expand outward, you collect feedback from customers and your team. If you're a young company, this might mean sitting down for a coffee with a customer or paying close attention to your support inbox. It's messy, it's manual, but it works. As you scale, though, you'll want to build systems that keep this going sustainably. That might mean automated surveys, in-app feedback tools, or structured customer interviews. Some companies even choose to outsource this, though I typically find that puts something that's too critical to the heart of your operations and your competitive advantage too far away from the people who are really driving your business forward. So I kind of prefer to keep it in-house. Here's the key. You need a consistent inflow of signals. Without rhythm, the heartbeat fails. And a quick note here, collecting feedback also comes with responsibility. Be mindful of privacy and data laws in your jurisdiction and the jurisdiction of your customers. Even if regulations don't necessarily apply directly to you, adopting a privacy-first approach shows customers that you respect them, and it helps you to earn their trust. All right, let's move on to the second phase, fill and process. This is where the heartbeat turns inward. Feedback flows into the organization, and now it needs to be reviewed, filtered, and distilled into something that is a little bit more useful. And that's the difference between a feedback piece and an insight. Feedback comes from somewhere, customers, internal or external. Insight, you've thought about the feedback, and you've turned it into something that has value added attached to the original piece of feedback. So let's talk about one thing about feedback here. It's not all created equal. Some feedback is actionable. It's a clear suggestion that you can address directly or enhance with value. Other feedback is guiding. It tells you how well you're delivering from the customer's perspective, how well you're executing. Both are valuable, but they serve really different purposes inside the organization. Now, this is where the role of what I call the internal champion comes in. The internal champion is the person responsible for really running the innovation heartbeat, operating the system. Their job is to make sure that feedback doesn't get lost in the shuffle, but instead gets turned into insights which people can act on. So how do they do it? One of the key components of the internal champion is that they take the feedback and they grade it across 4 dimensions before doing anything else with it. Type. So is this feedback piece, actionable, or is it guiding? Is it a guidance piece of feedback? Relevance. Does this align with the organization's mission, priorities, and purpose, really? Impact. If we address it, how big will the effect be for the customer? And difficulty. If we implement this piece of feedback, even with the value added that turns it into an insight, how difficult would it be? How hard would it be to implement that? It's kind of like a gating system. Weak ideas fall away, strong ones advance. Some pieces of feedback may not be relevant today, but they're still worth storing for later. Use your judgment on that one. Here's an important point. Big ideas, they rarely survive this process unchanged, and that's okay. That's cool. The goal isn't to take feedback literally with the innovation heartbeat. It's to use it as a catalyst. You want to combine the feedback with your own team's context, creativity, and domain expertise, domain knowledge. If you do that, you end up with something even stronger. And that's the key to taking insight and turning it into innovation, adding context, creativity, and domain knowledge. All right, let's talk about the third phase, the pulse out. So, we finally get here. You've gone through the process of collecting the feedback. You've distilled it, turned into something else. Now you need to do something with it. This is where distilled insights leave the center and flow back out into the organization, just like kind of your life force, your blood flows through the body as the heart contracts and shoots it out. Now, this one is a critical step, the third phase. It's tempting to just dump that feedback into a shared folder and call it, transparency or something, whatever. But unless someone owns the insight and has accountability for doing something with it, nothing changes. And that, a lot of the time in established, mature organizations, is where you see the innovation process start to falter and break. So the internal champion has to make sure that insights, of course, land in the hands of stakeholders who can act on them. Marketing might take some, product might take others. The key is purposeful conversations, ownership of those insights, and acceptance of the need for action has to be clear. That's how raw feedback gets transformed into actual innovation through this process. The internal champion, who's that, right? We haven't really talked about that yet. This role, this person, they really rest at the center of the system. They have ownership of operating this system and advocating for insights and advocating for the customer that they represent. The best champions I find share a few common traits. They're curious. That's really a big one. They want to understand the why behind what customers are saying. They also have a solid understanding of how the business works. They can communicate clearly, both in writing and in person, and they're assertive enough to advocate for that customer, whether it's internal or external. And they advocate even when change is not necessarily popular or desired by some people in the organization. The internal champion is really a big picture person. Someone who has all of these soft skills and these capabilities. It's a pretty rare combination. So if you are able to find someone like this, or mentor them, coach them, mold them into these kind of characteristics, this way of thinking, take pains to hold on to them, support them, compensate them well, because they're not just running a process, they're really fueling your competitive edge. They're helping you build the strategic moat that is going to keep you further and further ahead of your competitors as time goes on, and as this system drives sustainable advantage. Let's talk about measuring the heartbeat. Like any system, the innovation heartbeat, it works best when you measure it and improve on it over time. What we're talking about today, all of the tools that I'm going to put in front of you through like the links in the show notes and what have you, they're a starting point. You need to take this system, take the basics that I'm laying out, and then shape it to fit your unique organization. Here's some metrics that you can start with that I've found pretty useful at the very beginning when implementing and working with the innovation heartbeat. Time to insight. How long does it take to turn feedback from a customer into a usable insight? What's that cycle time? Conversion to acceptance. What percentage of insights are actually adopted by stakeholders? Time to action. How long does it take to turn an accepted insight into real change? So how long does it take to go from insight to innovation? Grading ratio. How many pieces of raw feedback does it take to generate one solid insight? And customer signal trend. Over time, are your guiding feedback signals trending up or down? Are you getting better or worse at the subject, the topic that lays underneath that piece of feedback? These metrics really give you a sense of flow. They show where the system is working smoothly and where it's getting stuck. They can help you troubleshoot different parts of your innovation heartbeat. Now, you might be thinking, listening to all of this, it sounds like a lot. Do I really need this while my company is still small? And the answer is yes. In fact, starting small while your organization is still kind of before finding maturity, it's the best time to really do this. And here's why. Meaningful change is hardest in large, mature organizations. Operating processes in those organizations, they calcify over time naturally. Politics between stakeholders start to creep in and get in the way of change and get in the way of innovation. Legacy systems also get in the way. By contrast, when your company is small, you can bake innovation into your culture early, and the system will grow with you. It's like building a habit. If you start early, it becomes second nature. Wait until later, and it's an uphill battle. Anybody who has come across change management projects or practices in large organizations is going to kind of be shaking their head and nodding in agreement. Change management is tough, and it's tougher the bigger you are. So start early, and this stuff will just carry through with you over time. Let's talk about innovation as a competitive moat a little bit. I want to expand on that. At the end of the day, the innovation heartbeat is not just a nice to have. It's a part of building that competitive moat, that strategic advantage. Companies that nurture curiosity capture feedback signals from customers, and again, both internal customers and external customers. This isn't all about traditional customer feedback. It's also about capturing team and employee feedback. Companies that do all that and then act on them consistently will always outperform companies that don't on metrics related to innovation and to growth. Companies that do this well, they'll be faster, they'll be more responsive, and more importantly, they'll be more customer-centric. Over time, that edge compounds. There's quite a bit of work, research work coming out of BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and McKinsey that I've read over the years that suggests that customer-centric companies over time have a revenue advantage of between 6 and 8% over companies that don't. And really what that means is that if you are customer-centric, you will be generating between 6 and 8% more revenue than companies who aren't in your peer group. So this is well worth doing. When innovation becomes part of your organization's rhythm, it's not just a one-off project or a lucky accident. It's an engine that fuels innovation, which fuels growth. Let's wrap up. Kind of recapping here, innovation is not just for billion-dollar companies. It's about solving problems with creativity and knowledge every single day. As companies grow, innovation stalls because systems break down to support innovation. There's no supply chain. That's the problem. The innovation heartbeat, it keeps ideas alive with 3 phases: pulse in, fill and process, pulse out. The internal champion is the role that makes this work. It's the nexus. Measuring the system helps you strengthen it over time, and starting early makes all the difference. If you want to try this out for yourself, I've built a free planning tool on my website that generates a more tailored innovation heartbeat plan for your organization. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, but you go on to the planner. The questionnaire takes about 10 minutes to fill out. I don't save the data or anything on my servers. It's very privacy friendly. There's nothing that I'm really taking away from your use of this tool. After you fill out the questionnaire, you'll get pretty much right away a more kind of tailored, customized, concrete plan that you can put into action. Treat that as your starting point still, but it gives you something really tangible to work with. So the link to that is going to be in the show notes. Like I said, privacy friendly. I don't save any of the data. Once you close the browser tab, it's gone forever. You can email it to yourself. There's an option for that. And it's free of charge. Like I don't charge anything for this. Your success is worth a heck of a lot more to me than a couple of bucks here and there for generating this plan. So take it as you will, do what you want with it. But give it a go. It's an interesting thought experiment at the very least.
And that's it for this episode of the Journey Podcast Edition. If you're building something from scratch or scaling something messy, make sure to follow, share, or just send this to someone else in the trenches. Until next time, keep climbing.